Good afternoon. It is time. Welcome to Bloomington Rotary Club Celebration of Service. I'm Ron Barnes, and it's an honor to be your president. Have a thought for the day. Optimism is a huge asset. We can always use more of it, but optimism isn't a belief that things will automatically get better. It's a conviction that we can make things better. Melinda Gates. And that's the story of Rotary. We want to make things better for our community, for our world. So welcome to this meeting. A reflection is incoming president, Tracy Jovanovich. Tracy?
What's wrong?
It's tracking Ron for some reason.
Oh, it's tracking Ron.
Yeah.
You gotta take that ankle bracelet off.
They just swapped the computers last year.
Well, I can still talk, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So in the spirit of on the spur of the moment, I totally forgot I was doing reflection today. However, I will share with you that we had a wonderful weekend. We were able to go up to Chicago and spend time with our oldest son and his new girlfriend. And I'm happy to say Dad and Sue and our youngest son and my husband, we all went, and she still likes us. It's amazing. But the interesting thing and the thing that I wanted to share is we've been up to Chicago 3 times, and the last 2 times, or the previous 2 times, it had been rainy and cold and blustery. And Chicago's a great city. I love Chicago. But this weekend, the sun was out. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't too cool. And what was so special was seeing everybody out walking. And it's been a long time since, and I don't know if that was because we were in the city. He lives 5 blocks west of Wrigleyville. I think of Bloomington as a walking community, but you don't really see groups of people walking. You don't really see people just stopping and chatting on the corner to people like you do in Chicago. And we saw a lot of that. Maybe it's because it was Mother's Day. I don't know. Maybe it's because the mimosas were flowing. I don't know. But people were out and they were talking, and it was such a great thing to see. And so when I think upon that, I would say we have a wonderful walking community. Let's see if we can all work to make it a walking and talking community and reach out and say hello to your neighbors. Take the time to admire the flowers. There's so many beautiful flowers out there. We all have something in common. Just take that moment to find that commonality and make that extra effort. We're all busy, but if you make the effort, it does make you all better. So that's my reflection for today.
Thanks, Tracy. Some people say it takes courage to walk around Chicago, so glad you made it back safely. Introduction of guests, we have Dave Meyer.
Thank you, President Ron. We have just 2 guests today on this rainy Tuesday in the room with us. If you could stand when I read your name so that we can recognize you. First, we have Lisa Wicks, guest of husband Steve Wicks. And Alice Uniger, guest of Charlotte, a granddaughter, no less. Do we have any guests online today, Joy?
Dave, we do not, but I will say hello and welcome to our guests in the room.
Okay. Well, I'd like to give you all, both of you a Rotary welcome and encourage you, if you'd like to learn more about the club, to turn to your left or to your right and ask any question, and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. By the way, Mr. Rotary, Jim Bright, brought back, remember we had an exchange of our flags with our guests from Germany, and Jim brought the one in from Germany now. So we have this, and our friends from Germany will be thinking of us often, and we'll think of them as we see this flag. So thank you, Jim. We have some birthdays to celebrate. Claire Kest, who ABA used to be Teresa Claire, her birthday's tomorrow, May 15th. Claire. Elizabeth Thompson, same day, May 15th. And Marcus Whited, May 17th. Congratulations and happy birthday to all three of you. We have some Rotary anniversaries. Alon Barker, 10 years. Yeah, and Dave Meyer, 10 years. So congratulations for your service to our club. Joy has an announcement concerning our Rotary Youth Exchange Program. Joy?
Thank you, Ron. I would like to share that the Rotary Youth Exchange Task Force is actively searching for host families, and your help is needed in that effort. I will ask, is Erica in the room? Erica Kovacs? Is she there? Yes?
Yes, she
Okay.
is.
Yay! Okay, so in the interest of spreading information about being a host family, which, by the way, if you are a Rotarian and are at all interested in doing so, please let Erica know or let myself know. But where we really need your help is spreading the word and the information about what it takes to be a host family. So we have created, and Erica can probably show it like Vanna, a handout that is the frequently asked questions that a potential host family would ask. So it's available. Erica has copies there for you if you need now, or you can email me and I can send, or you can email and I can send you an email version to share with anyone that you know, that you think has even brought up before. You know, I'd love to be a host family, or I've done it before and want some information on it. So I will acknowledge that Erica is our youth exchange officer. And I want to say that we will be having our next Rotary Youth Exchange Task Force meeting a week from Thursday on Zoom. We are always open to new participants joining us, as we are with the Youth Services Committee in the coming year. So if you're interested at all in this or have any leads on host families, please share. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Also, this Wednesday evening, tomorrow night, thanks to Steve and Lisa Wicks, we're going to host a incoming Rotary orientation session for all of our new members. So if you're a new member, haven't had opportunity to, and the joy of participating in an orientation session, please come tomorrow night, 7 o'clock at the Wickses. So thank you. Also on June 25th, if you're a past president, mark your calendar because that's when we will help both Tracy and Steve take on their new mantles of president and president-elect. And again, that's an important meeting because the past presidents have been great in assisting me. And I know that we will be great in assisting Tracy and Steve as they take on their roles. And Sarah has graciously honored to have it again in her home, which is a gorgeous place to dine. So past presidents, please mark June 25th on your calendar for 5:30 in the evening. It will be a lovely night. There won't be rain then. Sarah's promised that the weather will be perfect. At this time, we will have our annual Bloomington Rotary Foundation meeting. It's required that an annual meeting be held with the group every year. And Trent, the president, will be taking on that responsibility. Trent?
Thank you, Mr. President. Greetings, Rotarians. This is our meeting within the meeting that we do each year, and you'll see a couple documents that are on your table summarizing both the work of the Bloomington Rotary Foundation and specifically our financial activities. You also see a roster of our upcoming board and officers, and I'll talk about all of that today. First of all, I want to call this meeting within the meeting to order to make sure that we do that for the record. The purpose of the Bloomington Rotary Foundation is to promote and support the charitable and educational pursuits of the Bloomington Rotary Club. As we've heard already today, Rotarians are always doing wonderful things. This is what Rotarians are doing specifically together via our foundation to be supportive in our community. In doing this work, it's very important to recognize the members of our board who have been tremendous leaders in this process, serving with me in the last year. I particularly want to mention a big thank you to the following 3 board members specifically: Sally Gaskell, who is our slated president-elect; Lauren Snyder, who was the president before me and very encouraging, the one that hooked me into this job. Blame him if you don't like it. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't point to our very own Sarah Laughlin. Sarah has been a booster behind me, sometimes a kicker behind me, in the good work we've done to hit our goals. And her heart bleeds this foundation, and I don't know where we would be without her. So thank you to all 3 of them. I also want to mention our board members, and if you're a board member here, give a wave, because this is going to encourage other members to jump in eventually and maybe take your place and give you some relief. How about Claire, our treasurer? Alon, he's driving, or he would have been here, you know it. Jim Capshew. We've got Liz Feidel, Amy Osajima. She is in Europe. Good excuse, right? Jim Shea, Hank Walter. We've also, that's our board members, and of course with me. Let's give them a big round of applause for the service they do. These board members tolerate late night emails, random meetings that are called, fundraising goals that sometimes not even I fully understand, and we articulate and get those done. And they do those things religiously throughout the year. And so we're so grateful to them. And each year, our club provides 4 scholarships of $1,500 each to Monroe County graduating high school seniors. It's a beautiful thing. We make 3 $500 scholarships to deserving Ivy Tech students. We have set, as a board and a Rotary Foundation, a strategic plan of raising $200,000 to support our scholarships within our endowment held by our partners at the Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County. I'm proud to say, thanks to the vision of leaders like those that we saluted just earlier, who have been constant boosters to this, and because of your strong support, we're currently sitting at $128,000 towards that $200,000 goal. So we can kind of see it, Rotarians, and we can get there. Let's give that a round of applause. And the incoming officers have that commitment knee deep into their own mission and values for this upcoming year. So we will get there. And so when they ask, join me in answering that call. You know, the power of scholarships and the education that follows is the finest gift as leaders we can give in economic development. And we will see that here shortly. I see it in my classroom. I've seen it in public life. And of course, economic development does begin with education. Our Scholarship Recognition Day will be on Tuesday, May 28th, if I've got that date right. And to that end, to help support our scholarships, we will need just a little bit more until we get that endowment to where that needs to be. That means next Tuesday is going to be a hyper happy dollars to support that effort. So what's that mean for you? I'll give you simple instructions. This is just like my freshmen and sophomores, just a couple buildings away. Just bring your checkbook, bring your wallet, and we're going to have fun with hyper happy dollars. And Natalie, you can put me down for 50 to get that party started. Okay. So scholarships is what we do. We're going to help with that next week, celebrate some folks in a couple weeks, and it'll be awesome. Now, to keep us moving as a foundation, I need to keep us moving by asking you to take a look at this slate of officers and board members for the upcoming year. And I want to point out, we've got some of our best once again joining us. Of course, we've got some returners that you see on our list, but I particularly want to mention that Sally Gaskell has agreed to be our president, and that is a huge coup for us. I believe we've got Alon coming in as president-elect, so we've got two recruited for the upcoming year, and they're going to do good work, and they've already pushing towards that good work. And we've added some newcomers to the board to join this effort. We've got Gerano Rotish, one of our newer members, as well as Chancellor John Weichart, newer member, and John Zodi, who's been with us for some time. We're putting these leaders to work and putting them on the board under the slate that you have. And so to that end, if you like what I've said with that slate, I would accept a motion from the floor to ratify what you see before you. Ron Barnes with the motion, and I see a second behind the pillar, and that was our own Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. We've got a motion and a second. Rotarians, all those in favor of adopting that slate before you signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Congratulations, leaders. Let's give them a round of applause. So you have your leadership for the next year. You see the activities that this organization does. And the big takeaway I'm going to give to each of you, when Rotary asks, when the foundation asks, when these scholarships call us to do it, please continue to do that. If you look on the sheet, I just want to point out something very important here that I can't get away from here without saying this. In our giving to date for this goal of hitting $200,000, we've had 22 Rotarians who've donated or pledged $58,000 towards our goal. We've added to that total to get that to about 128,000 towards that 200. Rotarians do big things, and they do them very big and well when they do them. Let's keep adding to that and go from there. Okay. With that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting of the Bloomington Rotary Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Trent, for your leadership. Now to introduce our program, Glenda Murray.
It's my pleasure to introduce to you a friend of mine, Tim Fort, who holds the Evanley Professorship in Business Ethics at the Kelley School of Business. He's also an affiliated scholar at the Kroc Institute of International Peace Studies at the University of Notre Dame. Tim has received many, many awards, and I'm not going to read all of those, but I am going to mention that he has been nominated for a 2024 Nobel Peace Prize, working in business and peace. So I was pretty excited to hear that. He's written many articles, and he is currently working on a book with Kristen Hahn, the executive producer of Apple TV's The Morning Show, and co-owner with Jennifer Aniston of Echo Films. And they're working on something entitled Songs, Sports, Stories, and Suppers: How Shared Cultural Experience Can Save America. And that's related to what he's going to talk to us about today. So please help me welcome Tim.
Thank you, Glenda. I've been here at IU for, this is the end of my 11th year. And I met Glenda before my very first class that I ever taught at Kelley, over at the Poynter Center. And so we've known each other all that time in our church together. And so thank you very much for inviting me. Glad to be here. There's many, many reasons why I'm glad to be here. Topping them being that this gives me the opportunity to wear my orange blazer. You can't wear this in February, you know. I know that fashion people say you can wear whatever you want whenever you want to wear it, but it just doesn't work. And so, you know, to have a yellow shirt and an orange tie and everything, I look forward to summer events just so that I can wear this. It's the only time I really get to do this. By the way, I want to apologize a little bit in advance, and I want to thank all of the organizers. I realized last night that I didn't realize last night, but I have a severe allergy to sterno burners. And that is why I have been parked outside rather than eating with you, because I didn't want to keel over in the middle of my presentation, which can happen. So they've been really good of closing the doors and having me outside and bringing me at the last minute. And if you see me putting something like this to my nose, it's not an illicit drug or anything like that. It's peppermint oil, which helps keep my airways open. So if you see me every now and then going up like this, that's the only reason I'm doing that. So just so that you know what your speaker is up to. So I do have a question. This question is, where's my, so you have my presentation. Okay, all right. So I shouldn't be looking here. Right, gotcha. All right. I think somebody told me that at one point. So you can go ahead in the first slide, it would be great. So I want to start off telling you a couple of stories. First, a little bit about business and peace that Glenda referenced. And then segue over that into these songs, sports stories, and suppers that Kristen and I are writing about. So I started looking at this notion of business and peace, which I heavily cite Rotary, by the way, because for over 100 years, Rotary has been talking about the positive impact that business can have on peace. And so Rotary has appeared many, many times in the books that I've written, 4 books on this notion of business and peace. And if you ask people in the field, what does Tim do? Yeah, he teaches business ethics and stuff, but he's the business and peace guy, because we have established a new academic field of study. In fact, we had a conference here right floor below in fall. And we have scholars, we had scholars there from Africa, Asia, South America, Europe, and the US, doctoral students who are doing their dissertations on business and peace these days. And 25 years ago, when I started that, writing on that, there weren't very many people who were doing academic writing on it. And so when I was looking for my first sources of what would be an example, or who has championed, who have said something about business and peace, Rotary was one of the first places that I took a look at. So I was going up for tenure at Michigan. This is, 20, or the year about 2000, 2001. And my dean did me a great favor. He said, Tim, you're going to get tenure. Don't worry about it. Just relax, which is usually a very stress-filled time for an assistant professor. And I've always been interested in peace studies, always have been. Maybe it's because I have a PhD in theology as applied to business, but as well as my law degree, but I was just interested in it. And I was writing my first major book with Oxford University Press on ethical corporate culture, while simultaneously reading about peace studies kind of stuff. And what I recognized was that a lot of the attributes that I was saying constituted an ethical corporate culture mapped very well with what several anthropologists were saying were attributes of relatively nonviolent societies. I thought, that's an interesting idea. I wonder if you can make an argument of a reason to be ethical in business is you actually might reduce the likelihood of a kid dying. That's not a bad, that's a powerful statement. And so I was really attracted to the idea. And so I thought, I'm going to sell out the next 10 years of my career to trying to figure this out, because I really get annoyed with professors who view tenure as being job sinecure. They don't have to do a damn thing after that, just sit around because you can't get fired. I mean, tenure was supposed to be set up to ask the big question, the question that you're willing to fail at. And I said, what's the question that I'm willing to fail at, that if I don't get this right, if it doesn't work out, I can still look back and say, that was still worth a shot. This was worth the shot. And so with a colleague at Michigan, Cindy Scapani, we organized a conference in 2001, fall 2001, on corporate accountability, stakeholder accountability, and corporate governance, stakeholder accountability, and sustainable peace, a real mouthful. And we were going to have a 2-day conference in Ann Arbor. And no one would come. I mean, we couldn't get speakers. In fact, our friends were saying, please stop this, because you're ending your careers of asking this absolutely wacky question. And we couldn't get people signed up to come to the event. It looked like it was just going to be a catastrophe. And then 9/11 hit, and everything changed. And our conference wasn't on business and terrorism or anything like that, but everybody wanted to do something. Everybody wanted to say something. Everybody wanted to be with something. And this was the closest thing that they could find. And so Cindy and I ended up running 3 conferences and got this kickstarted, and had special issues in law journals and in other journals, and got this thing started of, how sometimes it's called peace through commerce, business and peace, things like that. So we started that. Then I moved on to George Washington University, which I always said was a, you can go to the next conference slide, by the way. I guess I can do that too, can't I? That's fine. So and this was the argument that we basically made. And I'm not going to go through all of it because I've got 20 minutes as opposed to 2 hours in order to tell you all this. But basically the 4 contributions that we argued, which is still the starting point for those business and peace scholars 25 years later when they're doing their dissertations, is economic development, providing jobs, not just colonialism kind of a jobs or exploitative kind of a jobs, but jobs that provide alleviate poverty and do so in a constructive way. Following the rule of law, because there's clear correlations that show correlations between bribery and violence in societies. In fact, Transparency International made a big announcement this past fall that they had found a correlation between corruption, bribery, and violence. Cindy and I laughed and said, we made that argument 24 years ago. I'm glad you finally caught up with us on this. So a sense of community, both being a good community citizen, but also within your organization. I mean, how you're treating people within the organization. There's clear correlations in the study that Cindy did showing the correlations between gender treatment, that the countries that treat women better, give them more empowerment, protect them from violence or harassment are exactly those countries that resolve disputes peacefully, whereas those countries that do not have those kind of protections for the women resolve disputes violently. And so there was issues of voice, there was issue of gender, and to track 2 diplomacy where businesses are able to actually step in and do something in order to alleviate violence. I've written 4 books on that. I can talk about this until next Friday if you want, but I want to segue into another story of this notion of cultural artifacts providing common ground for people to talk with each other, even if they disagree with each other on social and political issues, which is my current work. So I come here to IU in 2013, and I'm finishing my 4th book. The last one was with Stanford University Press, The Diplomat in the Corner Office. I'm wondering, well, am I going to keep writing about business and peace? And we do have a great school of international relations here, Hamilton Luger here at IU. But, you know, I was like, I've written 4 books, and should I keep working on this? And my wife is saying, how much more can you possibly say about this subject? Can't you come up with something different to talk about at the dinner table and business and peace again? So one of the great advantages of being here, of course, is that you got the Jacobs School of Music. And I do have a musical background. I had sang professionally for several years before I started to practice law. And I really wanted our kids to take advantage of Jacobs. My colleagues teased me that I spent more time at Jacobs early in my career than I did at Kelly, which was probably true. But my sons, who at the time were 6 and 9, were in the Jacobs Young Pianist program, where they would take piano lessons. And on Saturday morning, we'd be over there, you know, while they were working with their instructors, and I'd be sitting in the hallway. And I was sitting in the hallway. I was working on a lecture for class on corporate culture. And it just suddenly struck me, why couldn't you use music to orient people to think one way as opposed to another way? Music has a psychophysiological impact, a term that was given to me by a professor at the University of Texas, Kathleen Higgins. And it gets into our bones. It does something to us. It changes the way that we think. In fact, my wife is an addictions counselor here in town. And sometimes I don't go into her groups, but that seems like a little bit too close of a thing, but to some of her colleagues' groups, you know, in the evening, and there'll be like 12 of them or something like that. And I'll do a longer presentation of what I'm doing here today. And I'll play the music to see what impact that it has on them. And they have no interest of listening to me whatsoever. I mean, their body language is like this. They're just grabbing themselves as tightly as they possibly can. And then I start playing my favorite songs. And these are old man songs. And I'm going to show you this. We don't have time to play all of them here today, but I'll show you what the things that I have. So it's not their music. But after the first one, the arms relax. And after the second one, they drop to the side. And after the third one, the feet start tapping, hands start tapping, head starts nodding. By the end of it, I have them dancing. Because it does something to us. It does something to our brain. It gets into our bones and changes the way that we think. So there again, I thought, I got to play with this. I got to play with this with my classes. And I call these nudges, which is a popular term these days, you know, nudge theory and things like that. But a nudge is just something that encourages you to do something in a different way, to think in something in a different way. You need to keep people open so they have the autonomy to choose what they want to do, because nudge theory can be manipulative as well. But what I did was I took, some of you may be familiar with Kohlberg and Gilligan's levels of moral development. I am an ethics professor. So it talks about how people will approach the world ethically of what they think is right or wrong. And they go through it in terms of a human's development over their lifestyle. I'm going to grossly oversimplify this, but so that when you're young, when you're a child, or if you remain childish, that you do the right thing simply to stay out of trouble. Then there's another stage, and again, I'm oversimplifying 6 stages into 3, and I'm oversimplifying those 3, but that you do things in order to sustain relationships. in order to stay married, to stay a friend, to stay an international ally. You have to comport yourself in a certain way. Otherwise, the relationship will go away. And then there's another stage, which is kind of the Gandhi stage, that you do something simply because it's a good thing to do. So I developed these 6 stages. I took these 6 stages of moral development. I'm going to talk about them in a second. And I thought, could you use what I say is a cultural artifact in order to nudge people to think of a different way? Now, between the then and what the next slide is, during this time where I was starting to experiment with it, in addition to class, I decided I would start taking some classes over at Jacobs. I took a philosophy class in their doctoral program, and I realized that my music theory skills had atrophied a bit. So I went to the director of the general studies program at Jacobs and said, can I audit a music theory class? Well, some of you may know, because I think that she still is a member of Roni, Connie Glenn. And she was the person I had to talk with. Well, we're 5 minutes into that conversation, and Connie reveals that she teaches a course called The Music of War and Peace. We are off to the races. And so we ended up doing 4 conferences and editing a book on music, business, and peace. And then I went with that to look at dogs. I did a TED Talk in a dog park during COVID, because they said you could do TED Talks in other ways of how going to a dog park. If we have time, I'll talk about that more in a second. Dogs can provide a common ground. In fact, there's an organization some of you may be aware of called Braver Angels that tries to get people from different political perspectives to sit down and talk with each other. And there's a Wall Street Journal columnist, Elizabeth Bernstein, who is a graduate of IU, who interviewed them and said, okay, you got 2 people, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat. How do you start? How do you start the conversation? Yeah, we want to talk together, but what do we talk about? They talk about their dogs. That's the icebreaker. And so, so we have these cultural. I did a program for the IU Cinema on films, of how films can bring us together, and I'm going to talk about the playlist here in a second. And it's led to this book that was mentioned when Glenda introduced me. So these are the 7 nudges. Again, we don't have time to go through all of them. But if you look at the category on your far left, there is a category, again, this is the riff that I do on Kohlberg and Gilligan. You can look at the world in an us versus them way, in a rules-based way, that as long as everybody's following the rules, it's fair. The golden rule, good as it gets. I'm going to talk about these in a second. So us versus them, 0 sum. There's a winner or there's a loser. And you can look at a sporting event in that way. All we care about is who ends up winning. And there are times in life where you got to win. You got to compete. You got to get the job. You got to get the bid. There are times and places where you need to win. So if I want to put myself in that psychological state of mind where I'm ready for a competition, the song that I might listen to would be the theme from Rocky. You know, bum bum ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum 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 ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum. You know the song. You go from there, and by the time you're done with that, you're ready to sock somebody in the face. And so that's a competitive one. If you want a rules-based, that I can look at the game and say, I appreciate the game as long as all the rules are followed. I can appreciate the rules that athletes follow in terms of self-discipline. And so if I'm in a state of mind where I'm saying, you know, I'm just kind of lollygagging, not getting much work done today, and I need to get myself into a disciplined state of mind, these are just Tim songs, what I might listen to is a song from one of the military academies. Anchors away, my boys, anchors away. I mean, if nothing's going to discipline you, listening to a military march is probably going to do that. I want to pause on the next one in a couple ways. If I want to maintain a sense of sportsmanship in a game, a respect for the opponent, or a sense of friendship, we're talking about a dimension of a golden rule. Now, here's where nudges can become bridges. 2 stories. First of all, can you cue up the next song, or that song that we have here? If I want to listen to the idea of friendship, of being there for somebody, I might listen to this. If you don't get it, that's okay. All right. Here we go. So this is what I'd listen to if I want to be reminded of friendship. I wanted to at least make sure that we had Jen Aniston dancing across the stage. And the reason for that is, let me introduce you to Jen Aniston's best friend, Kristen Hahn, who is my co-author for this book, Songs, Sports, Stories, and Suppers. Kristen and Jen own a production company together, Echo Films. She was a bridesmaid at Aniston's wedding to Brad Pitt. Pitt, Aniston, and Kristen owned the production company first. The New York Times reported that Aniston was in the delivery room when Kristen had her first child. I mean, these are close friends. So, and Kristen and I have known each other for about a dozen years or so. A long story of how all that happened. It was kind of a strange story of how, but we've been friends. She's been out here at IU 3 times in the last 5 years. She was the polling chair holder at the Kelly School about 2 years ago. And as she was coming back for her second visit, I said, Kristen, how about if you and I did a presentation that showed how these cultural artifacts, songs, stories, sports, and suppers, can be a bridge to bring people together. And she says, that sounds great. So we did a presentation. It developed into a book proposal. We landed an agent. The agent this week is trying to pitch it to publishers. So there is a friendship golden rule kind of an issue. But I want to tell you this other story. I've shown this video. Some of you may have heard this before because it won an ESPY award a few years ago. And this is about sportsmanship, but it shows how people can find this as being a bridge. There was a women's softball game about 10, 15 years ago out of the Pacific Northwest. It was something like Eastern Washington against Western Oregon or something like that. And there was a woman named Sarah Tukolsky who came up to bat. She was a senior playing in her last game, had never hit a home run in her career. And wouldn't you know it, she hit the ball over the fence. She goes around first base, trips and falls, tears her ACL, can't move, crawls back to first base, hugging first base in tears. So in order to score the run, you have to go around and touch all the bases. Her coach asked the umpire, well, could we, her teammates or me, help her around the bases because she's clearly injured? The umpire said, no, there's a clear rule that you cannot assist a teammate around the bases. Whereupon the other team said, how about if we help her? And the umpire said, there's no rule against that. So the opposing team picked up this Sarah Tukolsky, took her around the bases and let her tap every base in order to score a run against them, which was the deciding run of the game as it ended up. I've challenged my audiences. Could you imagine in this polarized society that we are in, seeing someone from the other team, whichever team that is, and metaphorically put them on your shoulders and carry them around the bases to score a run against yourself, your team? Most people say no. They couldn't imagine it. It's too tough these days. But then I ask them, could you and someone from the other team watch that same video and agree that those are your values and that you both appreciated that? And every person says yes. These cultural artifacts are not going to change people's political orientations or mind. But we too often these days identify ourselves with only one identity. Human beings have a lot of identities. We have a lot of parts to us. And what our argument is that if we can uncover those other identities, even if we disagree with each other, we have something to hold on to so that we can talk to each other even in the midst of our disagreements. And that's the aim of what our work is about. Now, let me go back here for a second just to finish these up. The other kind of dimensions is to go to a game and recognize this is just a cool game. For me, as a Notre Dame graduate who taught at Michigan, going to that game was just a cool, I knew who I was going to root for. I always root for my alma mater, but it was just a magical event. And any of you who were here, for instance, when Ohio State played IU and the ESPN Game Day was here, I mean, you know who you wanted to win, but you could just soak up the entire atmosphere. Another one is the perspective of what I call the blimp, or just a sense of perspective. To step back for a second and get a sense that really is important. How am I doing on time? Because I can't tell here. Perfect, 5 more minutes. So I did a presentation here at that IU summer program where people, what is it? Mini University, yeah. And I had a woman come up afterward to talk with me. She didn't want to talk about it in front of the entire audience. And she proved the point that Kristen has made to me, which is we can't just talk about cultural artifacts. We should talk about shared cultural experiences. And this is a great example, I think, of an experience. She said that she went to Korea several years ago. It was a trip provided by the US government for people who had lost a loved one in the Korean conflict. And she said, we were sitting there at this memorial. And she said, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I was sitting beside a man that I really think that I would never be able to have a conversation with ever in my life. And he's sitting next to me. And in the midst of that memorial service, I started to cry. And the man offered his hand, and I took it, and we held hands together for the rest of the service. In that moment, the most important human being in my life was that man that I think I could never have a conversation with, because we shared something beyond what our political perspectives were. And so we have these additional identities. The movement one, I'm not going to go into, but I want to mention that we have these at different times of the day. Where I disagree with Kohlberg and Gilligan is we start in one area and we end at another. At some parts of the day, it's competition. At another part, it's friendship. At another part, it's transcendence. We have these at different times in the day. And our argument is that we can find through our music, through our athletics, through our food, through our cuisine, through our movies, we can find common ground with each other if we stop and think about it. And I've been using this with my students, undergraduates and graduates, for 10 years now. Give me a story of how this happened for you. And at first they look back, it's like, God, it doesn't happen at all, because everybody's at each other's throats these days. And then they think about it, and every one of them come up with an example. I mean, in some ways, this isn't any more complicated than how's the weather, something that we share. But it is a step beyond that. It is a baby step. But my goodness, we need some baby steps. We need some steps of some sort. And so we're offering this as a way for people to identify those kinds of parts of who they are that they could share with somebody, even if they disagree on social and political issues. So I have a task for you. First is a nudge task. The other is a bridge task. I'm serious about this. You should go home today. And I will share, I'm happy to share these slides. So you've got all those 7 categories. Find a piece of music that puts you in each one of those cognitive states of mind of how you look in the world, whether it's competition, whether it's friendship, whether it's transcendence, whether it's moving around. Because what you will have, if you do that, one, you'll have a better understanding of the concept. But the other thing that you will have is that if you recognize that you're not quite in the right state of mind at a particular time of day, you've got your own song that you can cue up that helps to get where you need to go. And you don't have to limit yourself to one song. I find this very helpful to me. There are times when I'm down and I'll listen to a joyful song and it changes the way that I think. So just do this just for yourself. You don't have to share with anybody, just do it for yourself. I can tell you that my students love this. They've never seen an assignment like this in the Kelley School of Business in their life. But it's a really helpful work thing to have. It's a really good life thing to have. The other thing is that if you take a particular note of those songs that put you in a state of mind of collaboration, and then you create a list, and you share that list with a bunch of other people, even if everybody does, and compare the list, even if people don't agree with your list, my strong bet is that if everybody shares their top 5 songs of collaboration, that nearly everybody will find 2 songs that they say, yeah, that makes me want to work with somebody. That wants me to be friends with somebody. These things have worked pretty well for me with my students. They have worked pretty well for me when I've done some consulting gigs, which I won't go into, but that's a whole nother set of stories. And I think that there are ways to help us orient ourselves in a mentally healthful way, and also in a way that gives us the opportunity to find common ground with people that we disagree, even if we don't end up voting the same way. Thank you very much.
Do we have questions in the audience?
Yeah, there's 2 things I'd say on questions. I can stand here for a little bit on questions, but if you have like a private question or something like that, I'll go out in the hallway here in a little bit to get, just to get away from any fumes and be happy to answer more questions out there.
My question is, before the election last week, or was it this week? Anyway, before the primary, people said, "Oh, you can't vote for that person because they're interested in business," and as if that were sort of a crime. And what do you do? What do you say to a person that feels like that? You bring them through, I suppose.
You know, do you need to have me repeat that at all? Yeah, so she was saying that before the election last week, the primary election, that there were some people who were saying, I can't vote for this person because they're supportive of business and I can't support somebody who has that positive of understanding of business. It's been kind of funny actually for me when I've been talking about business and peace that, I mean, I'm a business ethicist. The reason that I have a career is because businesses do a lot of crappy things. That's why you need a business ethicist, because they do a lot of bad things. I mean, but then I'm talking about all the good things that they can do. And that's true too. Business, like music, like religion, like everything is ambivalent. There can be a positive component to them. There can be a negative component to them. And so I understand and appreciate, and I will teach that businesses do some pretty lousy things. But I can also say, first of all, there's a lot of different kinds of businesses. There's the big multinational businesses. There's the one who runs the plumbing store on the side corner that is the family. There are government-oriented businesses. There are small, medium enterprise kind of businesses. There are ESG kind of companies. There are investors that are willing to invest in all of those. So there's a lot of different kinds of businesses. And it's worth pointing out the problems, but it's also worth looking at the good things they can do. Let me say one other thing. This may be a little bit more controversial. I think that businesses are the best option that we have to overcome our social divides, because you bring people together that may not otherwise want to go to the same church together, who might not otherwise want to in the same neighborhood together. And even if the only thing that they have in common is that they need to make money, that's a start. And so it forces people to work together in a way that they never have before. That's not to slide over the fact that businesses can do some lousy things, but I do think that there's a real positive opportunity that the workforce has.
Additional questions? Joy, do we have any online?
Not at the moment, Tracy.
All right, we have one with Tim right here.
You've mentioned a little bit about religion. At this table, we have a couple of preachers and a preacher's daughter. In Indiana, we have all three peace denominations, Church of the Brethren, Mennonites, and Quakers. They all have a college and a seminary. What contribution has that made to our state in terms of overcoming polarization and conflict?
So first answer to that is I don't know, because I haven't done an analysis of what each one of them has done to contribute to the political climate of Indiana. So I can't say that. However, I will say that I think that all of those denominations have made an amazing impact on the world. I think that they provided examples to the world of how to resolve issues where you are in conflict. I think that they have provided an example of how their community interacts within each other, of how to settle disputes within the community without necessarily going to outside sources in order to resolve those kinds of things. And so I think that, in fact, when I was at Notre Dame, my undergrads at Notre Dame, he was actually a Methodist minister who was heavily influenced by the Mennonites. And he brought in John Howard Yoder actually to come in and talk with us. And I just found it one of the most, in his book was Stanley Hauerwas, The Peaceable Kingdom, of really to be able to demonstrate the ways in which communities, which I think could be a neighborhood kind of a geographic community, but I think it applies equally to any kind of a community, whether it's a voluntary organization or a business, to be able to have face-to-face interaction, to be everybody to have a voice, for people to be able to understand how to resolve disputes through a third party within the organization. I think that those are all wonderful examples that each one of those traditions have been able to provide on a world basis. Again, I can't tell you specifically on the Indiana basis, but I think that they've had an impact on the world basis.
And for our last question, Aaron?
Well, actually, it's a comment. I want to thank you, Tim, for being here and for doing all this incredible work. to me, this is Rotary, this is peace building. And yeah, I want you to be involved as much as you can be here. And I want everyone else to join in and accept this as a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, just one thing, I would actually have an interest in Rotary, but I always teach on Tuesdays. Always. That's why we had to wait till now, till classes are done for me to be able to come. I always teach on Tuesdays. So, but we'll see how it all works out. So great. Thank you. Yep. And I'll again be in the hallway if anybody wants to talk after.
Wow, thank you. Creating a better world. Again, we heard it today through Tim's knowledge and work. A donation will be made in your honor to the Hoosier Hills Food Bank for your presentation today. So thank you. Some acknowledgements. Art Olmec, our traditional greeter, took on the role again today. Introductions, David Meyer. Our Zoom host, Joy Harder. Tracy Jovanovic and her impromptu walk in Chicago reflection. Thank you. Yeah. Bob Salzberg for his wonderful work as our editor of and pushing out our roundabout reporter. Tracy again as our mic operator, and obviously Tyler Martin Nichols for his work that he does, overcame great technological issues again today. So we appreciate your work, Tyler. Our next meeting, May 21st, in the Frangipani Room, and our speaker will be Stephanie Shelton. She will speak on the free cancer support and resources for Bloomington and Monroe County. So if you've ever had cancer in your life, this will be a wonderful way to hear what is being done in our area to help families and people who are dealing with cancer. So if you'll stand and join me in the four-way test, we'll conclude our meeting. The four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First, is it truth? Second, is it all concerned? Third, will it go in better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And fifth, is it fun? What a